The glorious scar, the path of St. John of the Cross to heal resentment.
There is a spiritual poison so potent it can chain a soul for a lifetime, resentment. But there is also a spiritual alchemy known to the great mystics that can turn that poison into medicine. In this itinerary, we will unlock the secrets of a mystical doctor of the Church, St. John of the Cross, to do exactly that. The formula for turning your greatest wound into a glorious scar is about to be revealed.
The diagnostic stage, the anatomy of interior idolatry.
In this moment, you and I have an invitation, not to watch another video, but to enter the desert of our own hearts, a place we may have avoided for a very long time. I ask that, by the grace of God, we would have the courage for brutal honesty. The wound you carry, this memory that burns, this offense that your soul refuses to release, let us stop calling it a grudge or rancor. Let us call it by the name the spiritual masters, the physicians of the soul give to it: a chain, an idol, a poison. To guide us in this desert, we will have the company of a man who knew the depths of pain and of night, St. John of the Cross, the mystical doctor of the Church. He teaches us that to understand the illness, we first need an accurate diagnosis. The physiology of a spiritual wound, according to the saint, begins with something he calls a passionate appetite. An appetite is a craving, and the memory of an offense, when it is constantly fed by our passion, by our anger, by our self-pity, ceases to be just a memory. It transforms into an insatiable appetite. It is that itch in the soul, that impulse to replay the scene in your mind over and over again, that desire to retell the story, to reopen the case in the courtroom of your heart, where you are always the victim and the other always the defendant. This appetite demands to be fed, and we feed it. And here we arrive at the heart of the diagnosis. The most provocative and liberating thesis that St. John of the Cross offers us is this: chronic resentment is a form of idolatry. Without realizing it, we build an altar to our pain. We worship it with our most secret thoughts. We venerate it with our conversations. And on the altar of this wound, we offer the most expensive of sacrifices: our peace, our joy, and our interior freedom.
This idol, the idol of our righteous indignation, gives us a false identity, that of the victim, the wounded one, the one who is right. But it robs us of our true and only identity, that of a beloved child of God, free and capable of loving like Christ. To understand this, imagine your soul as a great and magnificent stained glass window designed by the hands of God Himself to reflect His light in a way that is unique in all the world. Then one day a stone comes, a betrayal, a cruel word, an injustice, and shatters a part of it. The pain is real, the damage is visible, but resentment is our decision to sit on the floor, gather the broken shards, and spend days, months, years staring at them. It is our obsession with focusing on the hole, on the emptiness, on the darkness of that fracture. It is our refusal to lift up our heads and look at the rest of the window, immense, glorious, and still intact, through which the light of God, His grace, His beauty, still desperately insists on passing through to reach us. The problem isn't the broken window. The problem is that we have fallen in love with the whole. We have begun to worship our wound. This is our starting point. The diagnosis is made. If you recognize yourself in this description, do not despair. To recognize a prison is the first step toward leaving it. And our guide, St. John of the Cross, knows the way out.
The purgative way, the active work of denial and emptying.
So, the diagnosis is made. We worship our wound. The prison has been recognized. What is the first step on the path to liberation? St. John of the Cross introduces us to what the tradition calls the purgative way. It is the path of purification, and it demands active work, a conscious denial, a deliberate emptying.
The first step on this path directly challenges our greatest obstacle. It is the phrase our soul screams in protest, "But I don't feel like forgiving." And the answer from the wisdom of the saints is, thanks be to God. Thanks be to God that your forgiveness does not depend on your feelings. The great lie of our age is the tyranny of feelings. The idea that our deepest truth resides in whatever we happen to be feeling at a given moment. St. John of the Cross and the entire Catholic tradition teach us a more liberating truth. Your dignity and your power reside in your will. Forgiveness does not begin when the feeling changes. It begins when the will moves. Think of the fiat, the let it be done of Our Lady. It was an act of pure will in the face of the incomprehensible. Think of Christ in Gethsemane, sweating blood, and saying to the Father, "Not my will, but yours be done." The feeling was agony. The will was obedient love. This is our model. Your first act is not to feel, it is to decide. It is an act of pure faith, spoken in the darkness of your pain, trusting that the grace of God will meet your decision and make it fruitful. For this, I offer you a prayer, the prayer of the bare will. Pray it now or later when you are alone with God. My God, my sensibility and my emotions are in rebellion. They refuse to forgive. They cling to this pain. But I, with my will, which you created free and which I now surrender to you, in this moment, I choose to forgive. I renounce my right to revenge. I surrender this person and this wound to you. I do not feel it, my God, but I decide it. Do you act where I can no longer act? Once the will has moved, the second step of the purgative way begins, the mortification of the memory.
Masters of the interior life teach us a principle of spiritual combat called agere contra. It means simply to act against the unhealthy inclination. If an idol demands worship, the way to destroy it is to deny it that cult. This translates into a fasting and abstinence for the soul. First, fasting from rumination. You commit to fasting from thoughts about the offense. The moment your mind, out of habit, begins to replay the scene, you interrupt it, gently but firmly. You do not follow it down that dark path. You divert your focus to a prayer, to your work, to the face of Christ. You starve the idol. Second, abstinence from complaint. You commit to abstaining from speaking about the offense with others, unless it is your confessor or spiritual director. Every time we tell the story to gain sympathy, we are reinforcing our identity as a victim and giving more power to the idol. Silence breaks this cycle. It contains the wound and exposes it only to the one physician who can heal it. But it is not enough to stop doing evil.
one must practice the good. The most powerful agere contra, the weapon that annihilates resentment, is intercessory prayer for the offender. This is not an invitation to feel affection. It is an invitation to an act of spiritual warfare against your own ego. It is a discipline, a shock therapy for our wounded pride. By praying for the one who hurt you, asking God for their salvation, for their conversion, for their eternal happiness, you are acting in the purest supernatural charity. You are loving with the heart of Christ, not with your own. And it is impossible to continue worshiping the wound caused by someone for whose salvation you are fighting in prayer.
This is the work. This is the ascesis. It is the hardest part of the spiritual life, but it is the only path that takes us out of the prison cell of self-pity and onto the open road of freedom in God. The illuminative way, the transformation of perspective. And it is precisely when we engage in this difficult work of the will, in this agere contra, that crucifies our ego, that something extraordinary begins to happen. The grace of God, finding the door of our will even slightly ajar, begins to flood the soul with a new light. We enter what the spiritual masters call the illuminative way. It is the stage where we not only act differently, but we begin to see differently. Until now, the question echoing in our wounded soul was, why did this happen to me? It is a question centered on the self, on the ego. The light of grace now allows us to ask the only question that heals, the only question that sanctifies. Lord, what do you want to teach me through this? The first lesson of this new light is a radical transformation in the way we see our offender. Grace invites us to see them as Christ sees them. And Christ does not see them primarily as an enemy or an evildoer. He sees them as a miserable one. Understand this word miserable not as an insult, but in its deepest theological sense, a poor wretch, a soul captive to its own sin, sick in its will, blind in its understanding. Someone more worthy of a physician's compassion than a rival's hatred. Ascend in your imagination to Calvary. Place yourself at the foot of the cross and look up. See the face of Christ. There is no fury in his eyes. There is no contempt. There is a compassionate sadness, an infinite mercy, and from his lips springs the key to the entire illuminative way. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
They do not know. The one who hurt you, deep down, does not know what they are doing. They do not comprehend the extent of the damage, the offense to God, the wound in their own soul. To see with the light of Christ is to see this poverty, this spiritual ignorance. And this sight does not generate anger. It generates a liberating compassion. The second lesson of the illuminative way is even more profound. It is the alchemy of grace. It is the discovery that in God's plan, nothing is wasted, especially suffering. Your wound, that point of excruciating pain you hate most in your story, can become the privileged place of your encounter with God. As St. Paul heard from the Lord himself, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." How does this happen? Through the mystery of the offering. Think of the moment of the offertory at Holy Mass. The priest elevates the paten with the host,
a simple piece of bread, fruit of the earth and work of human hands. In that bread, our efforts, our joys, and yes, our sufferings are contained. The illuminative way invites you to do the same in your heart. Take the hard, bitter bread of your resentment, this pain that seems useless. Consciously place it on the paten of your soul, and with an act of faith, offer it to God the Father in union with the sacrifice of Christ. What happens then is the divine alchemy. You offer pain, and God uses it as a chisel to sculpt in you the virtue of patience. You offer humiliation, and He uses it to establish in you true humility. You offer the poison of injustice suffered, and He transforms it into the medicine of mercy offered.
Your wound ceases to be a memorial to your pain and becomes an altar for your sacrifice of love. This is the turning point. It is here that forgiveness ceases to be a burden to be carried and begins to become a wing that lifts us closer to the heart of God. The daily practice, the pharmacopoeia, and the guarding of the heart. The vision that the illuminative way gives us is an immense grace. But how do we live this beautiful and terrible truth in the chaos of daily life? How do we protect this new light of illumination so that it is not extinguished by the winds of the world, by our old wounds and bad habits? The answer is with the discipline of a spiritual athlete, an athlete for Christ. And every athlete needs a training plan. The tradition calls this ascesis, or a rule of life for the heart. The first principle of this rule is the guarding of the heart. The Desert Fathers taught that the soul is like a garden and we are its keepers. We must watch over the gates, our senses and our mind, so that the enemy does not enter to sow the poison of resentment anew. In practice, guarding the heart means choosing not to stalk the offender on social media, feeding the wound with new information. It means having the courage to politely disengage or divert a conversation that descends into gossip and complaint about that person or situation. It means, above all, refusing to press play on the crime scene within your own imagination. You are the guardian of your mind. You do not have to allow those thoughts to nest there. But defense is not enough. We need an arsenal for the counterattack. For this, you must assemble your pharmacopoeia of the soul, a spiritual first aid kit with remedies prescribed by the holy doctors.
The first remedy is the Word of God. Have Bible verses about forgiveness and mercy always at hand, like capsules of divine truth to take when the fever of rancor begins to rise. Verses like Romans chapter 12, repay no one evil for evil. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Or the book of Sirach chapter 28, forgive your neighbor's injustice. Then when you pray, your own sins will be forgiven. The second remedy is the ejaculatory prayers. They are arrows of prayer, short and powerful, that you shoot to heaven in the acute moment of temptation. When the painful memory attacks, respond immediately with an ejaculation. Jesus, meek and humble of heart, make our hearts like unto thine. Or the classic Jesus prayer, so beloved in the spirituality of both East and West. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. The third remedy, one of the most potent in this pharmacopoeia, is a specific devotion. I strongly recommend for this battle the Chaplet of Divine Mercy. Why? Because in praying it, you are forced to go outside of yourself.
Repeatedly you plead, "For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world." In doing this, you first recall the infinite mercy you yourself have received, and second, you include your offender in the whole world. You become a channel of God's mercy to the very person who wounded you. It is a profound re-education of the heart. Finally, a Catholic's rule of life is never a solo project. No one becomes a saint alone. The fight for forgiveness, especially, demands that you destroy pride and seek help. You need a confessor, the physician who in the sacrament has the power of God to absolve your sin of resentment and give you the grace to fight.
You need, if possible, a spiritual director, the experienced guide who helps you read the map of your soul and apply these principles to your particular situation. And you need a friend in faith, a brother or sister in Christ, a companion in battle to whom you can be accountable, not to complain about the offense, but to say, "This week I fell into the temptation of bitterness. Pray for me that I may get up and fight again." With these tools, the guarding of the heart, the pharmacopoeia of the soul, and the support of the communion of saints, on earth and in heaven, you are equipped. But one thing is still missing: the source of power that animates all of this, the source of true and definitive healing. The source of healing, immersion in the sacramental life. We have the tools, we have a new way of seeing, but the final question remains: where does the strength to use all of this come from? What is the source of power that irrigates our weak will and makes our poor tools effective? The source that prevents this itinerary from being merely an exercise of self-suggestion. The answer of the Church, always the same and full of mercy, is unequivocal. The source is grace. And the place where this grace flows in an ordinary, torrential, and guaranteed way is the holy sacraments. They are the channels through which the power of Christ on the cross cuts across the centuries and touches our wound here and now. For our struggle, two of them are absolutely vital. The first is the sacrament of reconciliation, confession. We tend to see confession merely as the place where we list our failures, but it is infinitely more. It is the emergency room of the soul. It is the battlefield where Christ, the divine physician, comes to meet us, not to accuse us, but to heal us.
You kneel in a confessional and accuse your sin of resentment, of unforgiveness. Two things happen. First, through the priest's absolution, the chain of mortal or venial sin is broken. You are forgiven by God. But the second miracle is the sacramental grace you receive. It is the medicine and the divine physical therapy for your weakened will. You don't just leave forgiven, you leave strengthened. You leave with a power that was not your own, a capacity to love and forgive that comes directly from the heart of God. For this reason, be specific in your confession. Don't just say, "I was prideful." Say, "Father, I am struggling with a deep resentment. I ask for absolution and for the grace of God to be able to forgive." And if confession is the field hospital that heals us, the Holy Eucharist is the royal palace where we are fed by the King himself. It is the summit of our itinerary, the beating heart of our faith. The Holy Mass, for one who struggles to forgive, ought to be a moment of sublime and terrible confrontation. In the moment when the priest elevates the consecrated host and silence descends upon the Church, your soul is invited to ask itself a devastatingly honest question. How can I, who am about to receive Christ Himself, present in body, blood, soul, and divinity, the very God who, nailed to a cross, said, "Father, forgive them," how can I keep my heart closed to forgiving my brother? This moment before communion is a mirror. It reveals to us the monstrous disproportion between the mercy we are about to receive and the pettiness we insist on holding. But the Eucharist is not just a confrontation. It is our only solution.
For in receiving communion, we are not just receiving a symbol, we are receiving forgiveness incarnate. Holy Communion is a transfusion of the merciful love of Christ directly into the bloodstream of our soul. The power that was on Calvary, the power that raised Christ from the dead, is the same power that enters into us to give us the supernatural capacity to do what is humanly impossible, to forgive as we have been forgiven. Each communion is an invitation to surrender our heart of stone and receive, in exchange, His heart of flesh. We receive the bread of forgiveness to become ourselves instruments of forgiveness in the world. This is the source. All our effort, all our ascesis only has meaning if it leads us to drink from this inexhaustible fountain.
From the idolized wound to the glorious scar.
And so we arrive at the end of our itinerary. We began with the diagnosis of the wound as an idol. We crossed the desert of the purgative way with the work of the will and the mortification of the memory. We received the light of the illuminative way, learning to see with the eyes of Christ. We were equipped with the tools of daily ascesis, and finally we immersed ourselves in the power source of the sacraments. Now, what remains? The promise remains.
In the beginning, we spoke of our soul as a great stained glass window, broken by a stone. The human temptation is to want God to simply erase the damage, to make it so the wound had never existed. But the economy of God is infinitely more beautiful. There is an ancient Japanese art form called kintsugi. When a valuable piece of pottery breaks, the masters do not throw it away. They repair it, filling the cracks not with an invisible glue, but with lacquer mixed with powdered gold. The result is that the piece is not merely restored, but becomes more beautiful and more valuable than it was before. The lines of its fracture become its most precious features. This is the divine kintsugi. God does not want to just patch up your soul. He wants to do something infinitely more glorious. He takes the shards of your pain, which you have finally surrendered to Him, and joins them together with the liquid gold of His divine mercy. Your wound, healed by grace, does not become a weak spot. It becomes a glorious scar. Like the holy wounds of the risen Christ, in the resurrection, the Father did not erase the wounds of His Son. He glorified them. They are no longer memorials of torture, but eternal trophies of His victory over sin and death. His scars are the proof of His love. By the grace of God, your scars can also become a testament not to the power of the offense, but to the overwhelming power of the mercy that healed it. And all of this entire path, is summarized in the final instruction in the great legacy of our guide, St. John of the Cross. He tells us, "Where there is no love, put love, and you will draw out love." This is not a nice sentiment. It is the most practical instruction manual in the spiritual life.
Where you felt the no love of resentment, you, by the grace of God, put love in the decision of your will, in the prayer for your offender, in the offering of your pain, in the seeking of the sacraments. You sowed love in the most barren soil. And the promise of God through the saint is that you will reap the fruit, peace, freedom, and love himself, who is God.
This was Faith Chronicles, helping you on your journey to holiness. Do not keep this healing only for yourself. The peace you have received does not belong to you. Be a missionary of mercy, beginning with your own story. Be the living proof that even the deepest wound can become a glorious scar. If this itinerary has helped you, share it. You may be handing the map to freedom to another imprisoned soul. May God bless you and keep you in His all-restoring love.